So, Assalamualaikum, a very good morning, everyone. Before we proceed, to ensure the effectiveness of this webinar and to show respect to our speaker, please silence your phone and make sure you mute your Google Meet audio. Honorable speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here as the moderator for this special webinar slots, and my name is Dr. Fatimah Salim, and I'm a research fellow at the Atta Urrahman Institute for Natural Product Discovery, Aurin, University Technology Mara, UiTM Puncak Alam. And on behalf of the Timbalan NAB Chancellor Penyelidikan dan Inovasi, we wish to extend our warm welcome, selamat datang, and thank you to all participants and guests for our live research webinar series 2.0. This sharing will run in 1 hour, and we will open for question and answer session in 15 minutes after the talks end. You may also write your question in the chat room for the speaker to address later. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce our honorable speaker. So he is a Prof. Emeritus Geoffrey A. Cordell. So he got his PhD in indole alkaloid chemistry from the University of Manchester in 1970, postdoc at MIT, and then he joined the College of Pharmacy, University of Illinois at Chicago, retired in 2007 after holding several senior administrative positions. He is the author of about 600 research publications and reviews 2 books on alkaloid, and in the editor of 37 books, and an honorary professor at universities in China, India, and Philippines. He is also a visiting professor in Malaysia, particularly at the Urrahman Institute, and a visiting professor at Japan, Thailand, Mexico, Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. He also played an important role in Malaysian Natural Product Society community. We have our president here also online. Welcome, Prof. Dato Ibrahim Jantan. His interests include the chemistry and biosynthesis of alkaloid, the holistic quality control of medicinal plant agents, eco-pharmacognosy, and the integrated natural product data system. I supposed to project this, but since we have some technical problems, so I will just let the Prof. Cordell slides to be on. Please welcome Prof. Cordell to give his interesting talk.
Thank you very much indeed. I greatly appreciate the introduction. Greetings from the United States, from Chicago, and it's just getting dark here, so good morning to you and good night to me. So the title of this lecture today is Society and Natural Products Growing Together for Mutual Benefit. And we're going to cover some areas that I've talked a little bit about before on visits to Malaysia, but there's a lot of new people, a lot of young people who are now in the audience tonight, this morning, I'm sorry, who should really be a little bit more aware, I think, of some of the breadth and depth of where natural products is at the moment and where it might be going in the future. So I'm going to give you a few ideas, maybe change a few hearts and minds on the way, and we'll just see how it goes. We have a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk about a couple of those a little bit later on. But you'll see some of the major challenges that we face on this first slide here. We have issues that reflect climate change, global health issues, and everybody in the world seems to be under the influence now of COVID-19, and that has transformed lives literally all over the world, and is certainly changing life in the United States and has done in Malaysia, I know. We've got other new diseases, we've got extinction and so on and so forth of species, and we've got the issue of sea levels, which we're going to get to a little bit later on. So what we end up with is, of course, a very confused state of mind. And one of the things I want to try to give you a little bit of help with today, if I can, is some clarity. And I'll do that by trying to encourage you to do a few things that might help that process. There's some wisdom from the past. And the wisdom comes from a saint, Saint Hildegard of Bingen, who is the 11th century, 12th century saint, who was very, very concerned about nature and studied nature and wrote about nature in her time. And one of the things she wrote was, "The earth which sustains humanity must not be destroyed, for without it we cannot survive." Now, just today, there is a report from the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, that talks about the cost of converting 30% of the Earth, the terrestrial Earth, into conserved areas, and what the implications are, what the costs are, the economic costs are if we don't do that. So I haven't read that report yet. I didn't have a time to read it, but I noticed it, and I noticed some of the quotes from it. And some of the quotes from it are matching what was said all those years ago, back in the 11th and 12th century. I think we sometimes go through our day and we don't think, we're not conscious, we're not aware, we don't pause to stop and say, well, where did this come from? And so much of what we use, so much of what we're involved with on a day-to-day basis is relating to natural products, whether that's for shelter, for our foodstuffs, resins, gums, waxes, the flavoring agents, the spices that we use in our foods, the perfumes and the cosmetics, the prescriptions, the OTCs, the traditional medicines, natural herbicides and insecticides. And of course, we have this dark side of natural products, of pharmacognosy, which we don't talk very much about, which is the substances of abuse. And we have to embrace that as part of our responsibility as well. Now, the research on these product groups, of course, represents completely different challenges. And today is not the day to be talking about those, but just to be aware that within these groups, there are very highly specialized research areas. We sometimes forget that aspirin is based on a natural product, based on salicin, which was first reported indirectly from willow bark, from Salix species by Hippocrates way, way back. And then, of course, it was very famous about the roots of a particular plant being boiled in wine and useful against all pains. What an amazing description of a natural product, useful against all pains. Okay. All right. So we were talking about aspirin, and aspirin, of course, goes back to Hippocrates. Gerard's herbal in the 16th century that was used for 300 years in Europe, and it talks about the roots of a plant which is useful against all pains. And again, that was salicin. In 1899, Bayer marketed aspirin. Aspirin is the first semi-synthetic drug that was marketed. It's obviously still marketed today, and the name A comes from the acetyl, spire from spirea, from the genus of plants that gave salicin. It's the world's most consumed drug on a daily basis, around 20 billion per year in the United States, although probably we're taking more than that at the moment. I have two slides in here for a very special reason. Camptothecin is a $1 billion a year drug. And it was first discovered in 1966 and reported in JACS by these two gentlemen with their collaborators, Munro Wall and Mansukh Wani. And this is a picture of them back in 1966 with the molecule of camptothecin. Camptothecin, of course, became a hot topic. Unfortunately, it had a negative clinical trial because the key pharmacophoric element, this hydroxylactone group, was destroyed when the sodium salt was made. It cleaved the lactone and made the sodium salt, and that destroyed the activity. So it lay kind of on the side for 11 years until it was shown that it had very special topoisomerase activity. And then the rest is kind of history in terms of its development. Taxol, also from Wall and Wani down in Research Triangle Institute. In 1971, and then approved for US by the US Food and Drug Administration in 1992. So that was 21 years for that to become a drug. And I bring this up because very sadly, in case you weren't aware, a couple of, let me think, about 6 weeks ago now, Dr. Wani died. And he was very active right until the last. This is him with a plaque recognizing this as a historic monument for the discovery of 2 blockbuster drugs, Taxol and camptothecin. I had the good fortune to work with Dr. Wani and Dr. Wall for many, many years as collaborators on our anti-cancer drug discovery program. So I miss him as a colleague. I miss him as a friend. Another good friend is Gordon Craig. And Gordon Craig and another good friend, Dave Newman, publish regularly a summary of natural products and synthetics approved as drugs. And there was another one just published recently, early 2020. And this details the natural products and the natural product derivatives that were approved as drugs in this 1981 to 2019 period. And you see, it's quite a high percentage. It's like 23, 24% of all the drugs that were approved. And that excludes the biologics, the vitamins and other semi-synthetic derivatives and total synthetics. So this is really the contribution that natural products makes. Now, global health recognizes that access to health care is a human right. That is written into the WHO Constitution dating back to 1946. So we must never forget that as we think about developing natural products, as we think about developing new medicinal agents, remember that healthcare is a human right. The World Bank, and you might say, well, why the World Bank? Said this: a healthy people require a healthy earth. Think about that. Now, this is an old statement, but it can never be more true than today. When we look at the world and the health of the world and the health of the people in that world and the economic impact that COVID-19 is having and will have for years to come. Now, in terms of natural products and global health, what we need, of course, and we'll talk about this more, is some form of interdisciplinary collaboration, both to conserve the environment and to alleviate the global diseases, because they are such an incredible burden on various aspects of society, as we all very well know. Mitigators of a healthy planet. We are in the anthropogenic era where the impact that human civilization is having on the environment in many, many different ways is tremendous. And one of those impacts, of course, relates to population. We're presently at 7.79 billion people. Below population growth, and it's population that is responsible for these other factors, we've got habitat and biodiversity loss. And those of you who go into UITM every day are familiar probably with a scene that looks something like this, where forest is being torn down for the development of sites for construction, for housing, and so on and so forth. Climate change. In the United States, where last year we saw huge forest fires in Northern California, we're currently experiencing extreme drought in the Southwest, and of course many parts of the world are seeing very intense hurricanes. So climate change is upon us, and that doesn't even deal with the warming effects and the rising sea levels. Another huge mitigating factor for us is, of course, time. Time. That we are running out of time. That time is a critical factor. And so the time that we are taking to discuss is time we are losing in terms of action. So what's this world in 2030 going to look like? Well, now we're at 7.79 billion, 8.55 in 2030. We're going to need, based on 2012 UN data, we're going to need 50% more food, 45% more energy, 30% more water. That doesn't even deal with the plants. and the medicines. We're going to be more fully connected with goods and services. We're already seeing that. I've already experienced that in getting stuff to my apartment because I need delivery. So we're connected in that way. That's the way I get food and other supplies. We're going to see faster and more integrated info access. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Higher levels of robotics and automation, cars, trains, and of course I had to throw this one in here. I just mentioned service delivery systems. Universal healthcare is still on the agenda of the World Bank. I don't know if that's a realistic agenda, but it's certainly still on the agenda. Higher healthcare demands, and one of those comes, of course, from longevity. People are living longer. People are living longer. You've seen that in your society, and we see it as a global phenomenon. What does that mean in terms of the medicines? What does that mean in terms of the supply of medicines? And what's the impact of climate change? How much warmer is it going to get? And what will be the impact? We've already seen this slide. There are a few people I've shown this slide to before. Looking at agricultural yields. And agricultural yields, of course, means medicinal plants, as well as the crops, the cereal crops and the range crops and so on and so forth. So in the northwestern part of the United States, it's going to be pretty good because it's going to be increased. But in other parts of the United States, we're already seeing extreme drought. In your part of the world, and unfortunately Malaysia didn't provide any data for this particular survey, but you see in this part of the world, you're going to be dropping probably in terms of agricultural productivity. So what's that going to mean for you? And who's looking at that? Is FRIM and these other agencies that you have, are they going to be looking at those impacts? And in terms of medicinal plants, what does that mean? What will be the impact of climate change on the production and sourcing of medicinal plants and essential oils? How is that being studied? If you've got a situation where the sea is coming up and invading your fields of medicinal plants or of rice or of other crops, what does that mean? If you've got extreme drought, as shown here, what does that mean in terms of medicinal plant growth? What does it mean in terms of what's in those medicinal plants? So with this in mind, a few years ago, 2012, I invented a word called ecopharmacognosy. And of course, pharmacognosy is a very old word. Pharmacognosy is the study of biologically active natural products. What I was concerned about was that we bring the green chemistry kind of philosophy much more actively into pharmacognosy. So ecopharmacognosy is now defined as the study of sustainable biologically active natural resources. And when you start to think about the practices and you start to think about the philosophy behind that, then you're challenged with the notion of what should I be doing and how should I be doing it? Which gets us to deep work. And I have mentioned this before, and I'm going to talk about it again because we're still not doing it. We're still not doing enough of it. And particularly for the young people, it's very easy to get tied up in day-to-day activities. Deep work is those professional activities that are performed in a state of distraction-free. Turn the internet off. Turn your phone off. Turn the Wi-Fi off if necessary. Distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive abilities to their limit. It's time to sit and think. What does that mean for us? What's our deep work about? Well, it's about illuminating the impact of climate change on what we're doing, on responding to the global health concerns. What are the local and the global health concerns that we have? How are they being addressed, and how can we, as natural product scientists, contribute to that? How do we respond to the losses of biodiversity and traditional knowledge? And you're seeing that on the big island that's right adjacent to you, right? Look at the change in the distribution of the ecosystem in Borneo, for example, in the last 30, 40 years. Our deep work is about developing global information access for natural products. How do we do that? And what's the significance of doing that? Who can we make that available to? and challenging conventional natural product thinking, getting out of the box that we're in. It's about collaboration and it's about individuality. It's that dichotomy. The individuality is thinking for ourselves and acting for ourselves and acting independently, but then realizing that in order to be truly successful in reaching our goals, we will have to collaborate. We have to collaborate. Developing only sustainable natural products. Taxol was a great example where clinical trials were held up because there was a sustainability issue. There was an ecological issue. You couldn't get enough Taxol to do the clinical trial because ecologists were concerned about the trees that would need to be felled in order to get the drug. Making sustainable practice improvements. One of those is in the practice of the plastics that we use in our lab work and addressing some of those issues. How do we translate the research to the patient? And we're going to talk about that in just a moment in a very different context. And how do we enhance the quality of traditional medicine products? That includes the dietary supplements, that includes the phytotherapeuticals, and it also includes actually some OTC products as well. What this means is that we're putting the patient first. We're putting patient at the center of what we're thinking about in terms of our research, in terms of the regulations, in terms of industry and the suppliers, and in terms of the retailer. And I've talked about this in terms of quality, safety, efficacy, consistency, and accessibility. We're not going to go into all those details today. But QSACA, from a patient perspective, is what we as patients all need in any medication that we take. We want that quality. We want the safety. We want efficacy. We need consistency, product to product to product, lot to lot to lot. And we need accessibility. It's got to be available. It's got to be affordable. So back in 2017, which seems like forever ago, I put together 60 challenges in these general areas of natural product involvement. General topics: sustainability, patients, traditional medicine, technology, secondary metabolism, plant analysis, synthesis, publications, and education. You can go back and look at those. We're going to talk about a couple of little areas of those just for a few minutes to illustrate some points. Time to start is now. The time was then. The time is passing. What are the challenges? What's in a name? For a traditional medicine or phytotherapeutical product to become a patient reality, what is it going to take? And this goes back to the notion brought out by Shakespeare, 1599, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That's about products. That's about what is in a product that we buy that is a traditional medicine, that is a phytotherapeutical, that's a dietary supplement, an OTC, whatever. What's in the name? Because as patients, the name is not important. It's the content. For a rose, doesn't matter what you call the rose. You can call the rose anything you want. We're not concerned about that. We're concerned about the biological response. We want that biological response of a beautiful, sweet-smelling rose. It's the content. It's the biological response that's critical. It doesn't matter what you put on the outside. You can call the product whatever you want. It's what's inside. Let's talk about fake, substandard, and unregistered medicines. According to WHO, 1 in 10 medicines in developing countries is actually counterfeit. The fake medicine market globally is estimated to be $200 billion per year. 75% of substandard medicines, according to a European Commission report, goes back 15 years, come from India. Now, this is getting to something that I've regarded as very important. for many, many years. Now we're getting to scanners, where you can have a scanner, and this is one example, where a scanner can actually be used using near-infrared spectroscopy, link it to AI, link it to data systems, to be able to look in a non-invasive manner at various products and answer the question, what's in there? What's in that name? So now we're getting a little bit closer to my kind of gold standard of where we need to be with respect to what we take to the field. Contaminated medicines. So here's some OTCs that were just withdrawn from the market. Zantac was withdrawn because the ranitidine in here had nitroso derivatives. So that's been withdrawn. March of 2020, metformin was another product that was withdrawn by several companies because of nitrosamine contamination. So even when we think of RX or OTC products, we need to be thinking in terms of, are we dealing with something that is as pure as it should be, as we want it to be, as reliable, lot to lot to lot. Malaysia has a problem, and I've talked about this with you guys before. August 21st, 2017, United States FDA took a whole bunch of coffees, so-called coffees, off the market. Coffees that were laced with various products that were of a synthetic nature, added to coffees for various pharmaceutical purposes, pharmacological purposes, typically for erectile dysfunction. And those were all taken off the market. One of the issues, of course, that comes out of that is, what are the long-term implications for a country like Malaysia to be able to export legitimate products, not products that are fake, but legitimate products? So that needs to be of concern. So for the patient, the traditional medicine phytotherapeutic products, crude or manufactured, are based on a trust. They're based on a trust. Fraud, adulteration, substitution, contamination are common in these products worldwide. Patients, we are all patients, must be assured, validating that healthcare right, that the name on the box reflects what's in the box, the capsule, the tablet, the extract, whatever it happens to be. How can this be achieved? Well, funnily enough, there was a statement that was made in late 2019 in the Lancet Global Health, and it's called the Oxford Statement on Medicine Quality. It was a group of scientists who got together, mostly related to synthetic products, and they put out a statement. And the statement supports the World Health Assembly resolution from 2017 regarding substandard and falsified medicines. Those have to stop. So it calls for accelerated progress on quality-assured medicines for patients. That's what we're talking about. And it defines the key needs for improvements in terms of prevention, in other words, stopping those products getting to market, detection, in terms of what's in the research laboratory, what's in the production labs, and what's in the field, and the response. How do you get product removal so that the patient is protected? This goes back again to a very old notion from Edwards Deming, who did a lot of work in Japan in the 1950s, improving products in Japan, which in the early 50s and mid-50s were shoddy. Quality begins with intent. You have to have the intention. Is your intention to bring quality products to the patient? He went on to say, we've lived in a world of defective products. It's time to adopt a new philosophy. Yes, it is. Standardization of traditional and complementary medicines is necessary, absolutely necessary, in order to conduct reproducible biological and clinical studies, which is what we want if we're going to ever look at effectiveness. Another challenge: can the translation of meaningful research results on traditional medicines and phytotherapeuticals to products and practice be made more effective for the patient, the practitioner, and the manufacturer benefit. Seems reasonable. We're learning from COVID. What are we learning? We're learning how to do rapid translation of research into the public domain. We're seeing results. We're seeing research results in the moment. In the moment, within the hour. Pharmaceutical company says we're getting good results on a vaccine. It's on CNN within the next hour. Is it premature or is it timely? There's a lack of peer review. These are not peer-reviewed studies. They're coming directly from the results of the pharmaceutical company or from the research labs. What's the motive behind that? Is it really for the patient benefit? Or is it for other purposes? And I can get very cynical about this, but that's another topic. What it's teaching us, though, and obviously everybody around the world hopes that this is going to happen, that the length of time to approve a new drug, in this case what we're looking for is a vaccine or some prophylactic or some drug treatment, that length of time, rather than being the 30 years that it took to get camptothecin on the market, that it can be a few months or a year. That's everybody's hope, right? That's everybody's hope. So it's teaching us a lesson of how long does it really take to approve a new drug? Can we do it faster? What are the shortcuts? And are those shortcuts valid? Are they ethical? And we don't know that yet. In the process, we have to answer the reverse question. Does it actually diminish scientific credibility because we're not doing the traditional things? We're not going through the peer review process necessarily. We're not going through all of the safety conditions that may be necessary in a traditional model for a new drug. Some more challenges. Can a global database of the summed knowledge, cultural and scientific, of traditional medicine, medicinal agents be created and developed for open access? I hope so. I really, really hope so. We published a paper back in 2018 with Jean-Luc Wolfender's group in Switzerland. And this is a model system. It's a dream. It's a model system. It has genomics data. It has biochemical data. It has taxonomic data. It has traditional use data on a source organism. It looks at the endosymbionts. It looks at the bioactivity data. And it brings all this together. And it makes this available through a single point of entry. Imagine if you had a single global portal where all around the world you could access all these databases at one point, and they all interrelated in one way or another, all right, to get you an answer. We could call that handheld ecopharmacognosy. So, for example, it's a very simple example. You have a digitized image in the field. You know this plant, Catharanthus roseus, my favorite plant. And we had GAMP. GAMP is the Global Archive of Natural Products. And it contains botanical, chemical, biological, and clinical and QC databases, kind of like that system that I just showed you. 100th of a second or less. You get the plant ID and you get the select scientific background. You can do in-field, remote, or wet analysis and get the data and answer the question, when should you harvest this plant? Now, or do you wait? So, for example, using GAP, here you are, you've got your handheld device. You use a global archive and you say, GAMP, give me a summary of the principal metabolites and the most potent biological activities of the leaves of this plant. And GAMP comes back and says, thank you for your question. This plant is Catharanthus roseus. The leaves contain over 120 indole alkaloids, including vincristine, used for the treatment of cancer. Is that too far-fetched? No, I don't think so. Not these days. Not these days. It's just going to take something special. But here's our farmer. Here's our farmer in the field. Access to databases for selecting the optimum time to harvest following in-field analysis by a farmer. Imagine if you could do that. How far away? 2 years? 5 years? Shouldn't be that difficult. That's a challenge for you. Some more background on this. So improvements in extraction, chromatographic, and spectroscopic techniques are continuous. We all know this. The question, of course, is how do we integrate all of those with the new technologies, the microfluidics, the receptor system development, biosensors, in silico analysis, standoff, remote sensing, all right? How do we begin to integrate all these into our research considerations? That's where that deep work comes in. Being aware of this, thinking about it, integrating it. That's going to be the way of the future. That's what's going to make the difference. Remember, everybody in the world now has access to the same information that you have on your smartphone. Everybody, pretty much. Certainly everybody who's doing science. So the challenge is where the thinking, where the human interaction is going to make a difference. So what's their future role? How will that integration be achieved? And whose priority will it be to do that integration? Make it possible. Can they be mobilized to achieve what I used to call pharmacognosy in a suitcase, which was taking the lab to the field? And we're getting closer and closer and closer to that goal. Another challenge, can all the medicines, natural and synthetic, be regarded as sustainable commodity? And the needs for 2030 and beyond be met through sustainable sourcing? Gets us to an issue that is really kind of somewhat new. I've talked about it and written about it a little bit, but it's somewhat new. We have issues related to national security, and one of those, of course, is COVID-19 now. And the financial security, the job losses that certainly the United States is experiencing. We've lost about 48 million jobs, 48 million unemployed now in the country. Food security is taken care of by the FAO. But there's no agency that is taking care at the international level for medicines security. Medicine security. Nobody is talking about this. I don't understand why. It should be the same considerations as food security. The availability, the access, the utilization, and the stability of the systems. And we've already seen with COVID-19 how the stability of the systems are very, very fragile. WHO Director General just indicated basically what we were talking about, that we're in an infodemic. Too much information, too much confusion, not enough straight answers. Big, big conclusion, which we're still learning in the United States. Follow the scientists, not the politicians. Can we get the right medicine in the right place at the right time? And that's a long-term goal for global societies. What are the essential medicines for a country? And how does that compare with the WHO list of essential medicines? How are these supply chains assured? How do you do that as a country? How does the United States? How do countries in Europe? How does India? How do countries in Africa, South America, all affirm their supply chains in the future? So we're learning lessons for the future from this. Another challenge, can the declaration of activity, this is a very personal one, for a metabolite in a biological assay be related to the relevance of what a sustainable human daily dose would be in the event of a medical agent being developed? So what's the scientifically based dose of a traditional medicine? Is there a need for one? That needs some discussion. Ecopharmacognosy focuses on sustainable drug development. Activity has got to be relative to that valid standard, because that's an ecopharmacognosy issue of how much material do you need for a human dose? Do you have enough material? Is that part of your plan? So we need more critical assessment in the literature. All you people who are reviewers out there who are listening in, what constitutes active at the international level? So, some future directions. High levels of collaboration in a research agenda for patient benefit. Expanded integrated data systems for ethnopharmacology, chemistry, botany, and biology. Enhanced handheld access to digitized data. Enhanced remote sensing and AI systems. More attention to the sustainability of medicinal plants and their QSACA, quality, safety, efficacy, consistency, and accessibility. Some more future directions. Focus on biologically relevant marker compounds in complex plant matrices and their changing levels as you go along the pathway towards standardization. Balancing the risks and benefits for approval of a third class of drugs. Some countries are addressing that issue. More countries need to, in my opinion. More direct translation of research to society, but doing it in a responsible manner. Enhanced research programs on the impact of climate modulation on changes in the chemistry of traditional medicines. How do we bring these together? So I thought about this, and I came up with a word. Cyber, eco, ethno, pharmacolomics. Cyber, eco, ethno, pharmacolomics. Taxonomics, agronomics, metabolomics, digital aspects, eco aspects, genomics, economics. They all come together. They all come together. What's the cyber part? The cyber is the data accumulation and the integration, analysis, and access to that data. How do we do that? How do we make that more effective? Spectral interpretation, structure elucidation, and metabolite networking through AI. That's where we need to be. Confirmed, supported by human intervention. We're not relying on AI totally. We're using it as a support system for ourselves. Remote sensing, whole big topic. And the translation of the results. That's a cyber activity. It's making sure that you have access to those results through your smartphone. The eco is the ecopharmacognosy. It's the sustainable research philosophies and laboratory practices that are an outcome of ecopharmacognosy, of thinking in those terms, thinking of what we're doing in a very different manner. It's looking at the impact of climate change on what we do, how we do it, and what that means in terms of the availability and the content of medicinal plants in the future. And looking at new sources of natural product diversity as sources of new compounds, new biologically active compounds that would be of interest. And natural product diversity that can be sustainable. The ethno, it's the collection of that data, recognizing the CBD and the Nagoya protocols in terms of access to that information. It's collecting it, it's analyzing it, right, on a global basis, so that we don't see a particular use of a medicinal plant in a country in isolation and separate from how it might be used in another country or another part of the world completely. Prioritizing research based on ethno information that's been processed and analyzed, and on local needs. What are your local needs? What are your diseases that need attention, that nobody else is going to look at? The pharmacology. What is being tested? Is it stable? Is it analyzed? Is it standardized? How do we develop assays that are completely reproducible on a day-to-day, sample-to-sample basis? Can they be reproduced in other labs? The network pharmacology. How are these medicinal plants acting? Where are they acting in the genome? Is that useful information? How do we process that? What does that mean in terms of new drug discovery? Lots to do in synergy and antagonism. Too many compounds in a plant to be fully analyzed, but we still need to understand whether compounds within that plant are having a synergistic or antagonistic effect on each other. And what can we do about that if we find that out? Can we selectively extract certain materials and potentiate the synergy, reduce the antagonism? Rationalize. This is so important. rationalize the unsustainable complex TM products. What are the products where there's over 50 or even 20 plant materials involved in that particular product as a TM? Can that be rationalized, or are they really all necessary? And how many of those are not sustainable? How many of them are still being wildcrafted, still being introduced into products? The omics of natural products, there's lots of them. There's taxonomic. What is the organism? There's genomics. What can it produce? Particularly, we're looking at that now in terms of bacteria. Bacteria that have 20, 30, 50 different gene systems that are capable of forming individual groups of secondary metabolites, PKS systems and polypeptide systems, and so on and so on and so on. So we're discovering new gene clusters, biosynthetic gene clusters, that we don't know what they're capable of producing. So we need to really get to the point of being able to elaborate those systems in order to be able to effectively see what they are producing. There's new drugs there, no doubt about it. The metabolomics, what does it produce and how does that change under various conditions? The agronomics, how can it be grown? How can the plant be grown? That's huge, obviously. And the economics in terms of the farmer, the manufacturer, and the distributor, the retailer, and finally the patient. What are the economic issues in all of those sectors? So we dream a future of natural products. We envision natural product development as a wider societal responsibility to integrated healthcare, including the sustainability perspectives. Always thinking about those terms. Not because it's going to affect us, but it's going to affect our children and our grandchildren and their children. Cooperation and collaboration between government, academia, and industry. I'm a huge supporter of this, huge supporter, because I've been in those programs. I've seen them work. They can work. They can work, providing the science is leading. We need that for stage program development of people, information systems, and facilities dedicated to patient needs. We need to develop focused, collaborative, interactive research groups at centers of excellence. You have some of those centers of excellence in Malaysia. Potentiate them. And finally, apply the integrated technologies in a societally relevant manner. So I'm a dreamer. So was George Bernard Shaw. You see things and you say, why? But I dream things that never were, and I say, why not? But my famous dreamer, of course, my favorite famous dreamer is John Lennon. The dream you dream alone is only a dream. The dream you dream together is a reality. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and I hope that this will stimulate some thoughts and discussion, and thank you for your attention. This has been a lot of fun for me. I hope it was enjoyable for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for enlightening us with very informative and interesting speech. I really like the new words that you address, which is a combination between cyber, eco, ethno, pharmaco, and omic. Okay, now I open the session for question and answer. You also may write your question in the chat room for Prof to address.
I have, well, there are many issues presented this morning, Jeff. Thank you very much. You know, those issues are actually playing on my mind over the many years I've spent in research. And as I've always told you, that when I listen to your lecture, I end up being depressed after that. Because there are so many questions, but you know, what's the answer to these questions? The answers are there, but for a small country like Malaysia, you know, and in a developing world, although people say that we have developed in some sense, you know, I always wondered, where do we start to make things right? You know, where do we actually hold the bull by the horn and then start doing something substantial to change things. So it has been many years, and I see the same issues being questioned again and again. But in terms of concrete and really serious efforts to change things with regards to developing traditional medicine, for example, in this country, we're not getting anywhere I would judge as being successful. We still have the same issues about low quality products, and you have shown us just now the things that we market to the USA is being questioned in terms of its authenticity and in terms of adulteration. So this is really I mean, where do we go? How do we go about doing something much more substantial? And what kind of policies do we change? And who should be the players in this? Who are the right people, if there's a right people or right organization? And what do we tell our young scientists, our youngsters who are, I see almost 250 people who join, and I believe a lot of the young people are here. How do they start? And what do they do? So I like to hear more from them as well. I'm an old person going into the background, but these people are going to take this thing up.
No, you're not, right? Come on.
Okay, that's my question. Where do we start?
You're being too modest. You're being too modest.
Okay, right. Over to you. I'll ask some questions later on.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this before, but I think what it's going to take is you're going to have to get some of the key people, the senior people, very senior people, in a group of societies, group of scientific societies, chemistry, biology, natural products, computer science, together, and you're going to have to come up with a program, and the answer that the model for that is what was done 30 years ago when a group of scientists from a number of different disciplines got together and developed the Hubble telescope. And it sounds strange to use that as an analogy, but really that's what you're talking about. You're talking about a highly collaborative, fully developed program that is going to run for years. It's not a 5-year program. It's not a 10-year program. It may be a 15 or 20-year program that the government is going to have to commit to. And it's going to involve a lot of different people in a lot of different universities in a lot of different areas that will come together. And look at that word. Look at that word, cyber eco ethnopharmacolomics, all right? That tells you who's involved. It tells you who's involved. It tells you who needs to be around the table. Who needs to be around the table to kick it off, to get things moving, all right? To do that deep work, to do that deep thinking, individually, collectively, go away, think about it, come back, got to have open minds, forget about the barriers, but you've got to come together in a collaborative manner, because if people stick in their fiefdoms, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. All right, but people have to come together. You need a strategic planning session. You absolutely need a strategic planning session. Once you've introduced the group, all right, this very, very senior group, once you introduce them together, you've put them together, then you need to do some strategic planning and say, okay, how are we going to do this? What are our priorities? How do we sort through those? Who's going to be responsible? Put together a 10 or 15-year program, but do it through continuous relationship with the ministries that are likely to be involved, right? Let them know that this is in the works. Let them know that there's a planning going on. And again, we can talk about this offline for a long period, but that's just an idea to give the young people an idea of how big this needs to be in order to be effective in my little brain.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Jeff?
Yes.
There is a renewed interest, at least in Malaysia, about the mitrodine now. Ketum program.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts from which aspect, Hadiani?
From the use of natural product, traditional medicine, the species, the usage. Yeah, that's mainly about usage and also the regulation.
Okay, so I had a slide there. I have to give you an answer offline, basically. But online, I can say this. If you remember the slide that said that talked about actives and talked about what it is you are testing. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Then think about Mitragyna and think in terms of what is it that has been tested, how was it assayed in terms of quality, and in terms of the purity, if you were testing pure alkaloids, for example, from there, would you be testing demonstrably pure alkaloids? Because some of those alkaloids are a little bit tricky to isolate in pure form. So I think that's one of the considerations. In other words, it's the classic natural product situation of the literature has information. Is that information reliable, reproducible? What was tested? How was it tested? And do I need to go back and take a look at that in order to move on? Or do I assume that that's adequate? So from a young people point of view, let me just point this out. As you look at the literature in general, whether it's on natural products or anything else, be very critical about how the experiments were done and what is being claimed on the basis of those experiments. Because it's very easy to make statements and draw conclusions that are overstated, that are hyperbole, that are exaggerating your results. And you don't want to be in that position because other people can get into trouble, can get into research trouble. They can have research problems because they may assume that that's all okay, but it might not be. So be very critical as you look at the literature on what's been done and how it's been done and what the interpretation was.
Okay, thank you.
So, but Hadiani, yeah, we can have that conversation sometime.
Yeah, we need to.
Yeah, okay.
Another question is that you have been working with us for quite a long time. I mean, Malaysia in general with various universities and so on. There are a lot of talent, I think, in Malaysia in this area, and there's also a lot of resources. But we have been doing this like for 30, 40 years, but we have still not able to come up with something that is substantial for societal benefits. Let's just be critical.
Yes.
What didn't we do? What we did wrong, and how do we get out of this circle, of this circus of going round and round and do something?
Well, maybe the question is what did we not do? Not what we did not do wrong. What did we do wrong? We did a lot of things, but what did we not do?
Yeah.
What will it take that make that change?
I think you both know the answer to the question, but I'll state the answer.
I want the others to know as well.
Exactly. That's why I'm going to say it, Cozy. You have to talk. You have to talk to each other. And I remember the first time I ever went to Malaysia and went to a couple of different government labs, and basically they were doing the same research in these two different labs, and they didn't know that they were doing the research. And so what's happening is instead of having openness and collaboration and collective goals, you've got silos being built up. And the silos are operating such that people are associated with a project and nobody else can touch that project. And they don't always tell people that they're working on that project. So other people say, well, that sounds like a good area that I've looked at. Why don't I start working on that project? And so when that happens at different ministry levels, then you get the same topic being worked on at 2 different ministries. And you don't have that kind of money to be doing that. So if you've got a topic that works across several different ministries, it's the ministries that need to be getting together. And you need to be, I say you, the senior people that we're talking to here, you need to be getting together and saying to Ministry A, you need to talk to people in Ministry B, if they don't already do that, which they may not be doing, and get together because you're working on the same thing and you're not getting the answers. And again, go back to what I talked about earlier on in terms of the long-term projects. Think big. Think in terms not of 1 or 2 medicinal plants, all right? And you're already doing this at one level. You're already doing it. How many plants do you have on your hit list now? 20 odd plants?
30.
30 plants. Okay. All right. Let me ask you this question though. All right? Let me be really hard on you, because you know, I think that's what you want. Who's looking critically at that list and the progress that's been made on that list since that program started with those 10 or 11 plants initially? How is that being reviewed? How is that being updated? Or are things just being allowed to drift? Because if they're being allowed to drift without very hard benchmarks, then that's where you're going to get into trouble. You'll never get a product. You'll never get change. You'll never know when to drop a topic, when to drop a project, when to say, forget it. Let's move on to something else. Let's put our money somewhere else. So you know that's critical. And that needs to happen. It needs to happen. Seriously, it needs to happen. And you know, I've said that before. So. Yeah. Anyway.
I agree with you, Jeff. What is missing, I think, in our country? Well, I'm speaking from the context, in the context of the Malaysian political environment. You know, government changes, and when that happens, policies change as well. So I think for natural products research in this country to actually, you know, expand and becomes better, we need to have a sustainable policy. The policy should not change. Yeah. And this is the issue with the herbs research. I mean, we had different governments taking over in the last 10 years, and the herbs also change. You know, and the research that was done, as you mentioned, become research done in silos mostly. And then when the changes occurs, there is no one really following through on the success or the progress. You know, so this is one of the things that I feel the research community as a whole, the society maybe, or you know, some enterprises within these organizations can actually help to change this thing, make it more sustainable. When it's of course, money is an issue. It's always been an issue before and now, and even more so in the future. But if policies are in place and sustainable, I mean, things can be done with whatever resources that we have. Right. So, you know, just my thought about this. You know, it's there, but as I said again to you, where do we start doing this? How do we start doing this? And who are the people who can be the you know, the people to do this, the strong people to do this, the loud voice that we want within
I mean, you've got 2 issues. One is you've got a long-term existing program, and you need to critically look at that. And then you've got the whole question of what do we do next? And the what do we do next, I think, has to be on the basis of bringing a lot of people together and strategically and setting you know, one of the things that many countries have is something that corresponds in various ways to the National Institutes of Health in the United States. Now, that NIH has got all kinds of problems, and it's obviously at the moment being very heavily politicized. But for years and years, it wasn't political in that sense. All right, it had a reasonably stable budget. it knew what its role was in society, and that role in society didn't change, right, with a changing government, whether it was Republican or Democrat or whatever. It knew its function, and although some of the priorities changed, of course, as diseases came and went, there was a certain stability to that, and that's what you need if you're going to have long-term goals of raising standards, of improving products. If you do it, one of the reasons why I focus on the patient aspect, and why I start with this notion of global health and societal health, is that's what politicians can understand, because it's not about the science, it's about improving the health of the country, improving the environment, and improving the health of the economy in terms of more healthy people working. We can't open our economy well in the United States at the moment because we have people who are unhealthy, who can't go back to work because they're not healthy enough.
Yeah.
True.
So we have to recreate a healthy environment. Right? So putting in terms of the patient and the patient's contribution to the economy, not as a liability to the economy in terms of someone who's unemployed, sick in a hospital, or working, earning, paying money, spending, taxes, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So if you put it into a political in terms of enhancing patient care, enhancing the health generally of society, it's a better sell, I think, than putting it in terms of here's the science and we can do all this. No, we want to do this for the patients, and just by chance we have all the science and the expertise to be able to do it.
Yeah. All right. We have a comment from Professor Nordin Lajis, who is live on the Facebook. Thank you, Prof, for joining us. I don't know whether you are still with us. He's on the live Facebook.
Hello, Prof.
He has written some comments there in the chat box. Would you open the chat box and probably give?
I have it, but there's so many comments there. I don't know where.
Yeah, just scroll down right to the bottom, please.
To the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow, there's a lot of comments here.
Yeah, press hot from the press.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of things here. Wait a minute.
Now just go right to the bottom.
Nordin.
Yeah.
Hi, Nordin. We need political will. Yes, correct. So what we need to deal with is the politicians. Absolutely correct. The economic system of the world needs to be developed. The capitalism. Profit-driven economy is drowning the. Change the curve from the bottom. Well, change the curve has to come from both directions. But in this particular case, yes, it does have to come from the bottom, because obviously the government needs to be persuaded that this is a very, very wise investment. That UNDP report today that I talked about very, very early on in the presentation relates to the economic benefit 5-to-1 in terms of investing in conservation rather than investing in the continuing destruction of the planet. So go back to that. We change hearts and minds, but we do it with the argument about the patient, I think, because we are all that. We are all patients in this process. We all benefit from having a good healthcare system, good medicines, medicine security that are available, that are accessible. Thanks for the question, Nordin.
Mm-hmm.
We still have Professor Ibrahim Jantan with us. Okay, Prof. Dato? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yeah,
thank you for the very
my pleasure. Good to hear you.
Yeah, I have a question on, you're talking just now about the research approach towards the discovering new drugs in your slides. Recently, there's a report saying most of the drugs are being discovered through drug repositioning, especially to discover drugs with very short time, rapid discovery of drugs. A good example is to discover drugs to treat COVID-19. They are using drug repositioning, chloroquine, hydrochloroquine, and so on, antiviral agents.
Right.
So what do you think the future direction will be for nature product research? Because I've seen a lot of work being done with routine. Routine, what I mean is in Malaysia, we are doing a lot of isolation, structure solution, isolation, compound new structures, and so on. There's not much integrations of other areas.
That's right.
So that's what you have raised just now. So,
That's right.
Thinking forward, what will be the role of natural products, especially in times of need? Like we need the rapid discovery of drugs to treat diseases like COVID-19. Things that are unpredictable.
I mean, the reason why I brought up some of the issues from COVID-19 were because I think there's lessons to be learned there that we need to grab onto. And one of them is exactly the issue that you were just raising, that I've kind of hinted at in the presentation, which is, okay, fine. We're in the midst of COVID-19. We need antivirals. That's just part of a long list of drugs that we need. You know that there are other drugs that are needed in society for various tropical diseases that are not going to be met by any pharmaceutical company. So how are you going to address that? How are you going to address that healthcare need for your country, for the region? Because it becomes a regional issue. And in some cases, for example, with dengue or something like that, it becomes a global issue. There's drug need there. Right. How do you begin to grapple with that? All right, in terms of the COVID-19 experience, what's being created there is perhaps a model for a new type of drug approval process. And that's what we need. That's what we need to be looking at. How can we potentiate that particular aspect of drug discovery, of turning a drug from initial response in vitro to an animal model to clinical, to more detailed pharmacology and some clinical trials? How can we do that rapidly so that it doesn't take 15 years or 20 years or whatever? Can we bring that for a non-COVID related drug, can we bring that down to 3 or 4 years? Because that's when we can see that we have an impact, where we see that our research has an impact. You know, Wall and Wani were lucky. Wall and Wani were lucky. They discovered camptothecin in 1966 and it became a drug in 1995, you know, basically 30 years. Both of them were alive to see that happen and see it become a billion, or see the derivatives become $1 billion a year drugs. So they're very, very happy about that. They should have got the Nobel Prize for that, but that's another issue. Point being that we need to cut that time down, and COVID may be providing us with that model. That's an opportunity for natural product research, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's a question from Dr. Muhammad Zare to address. Dr. Muhammad Zare.
Yes, I see that one in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Below Prof. Nordin's comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the other lecture, isn't it? That some of you have heard already. His question. Let me just share the question so that everybody can, if they can't see it quite. How can we ensure about these old medicines? Can we still consume them? Many people believe they're more effective than normal medicine. Okay, so now we're into the myths, right? We're into the myths of traditional medicine. And the issue, we're into two issues. The 12 myths of traditional medicine. Myth number one, you know, is the myth of just because it's been taken for, you know, hundreds or thousands of years, is it safe and effective? And the answer, of course, is no. And on and on. And it relates to the issue of Kuseka. All right, it relates to the issue, what is it that you're taking Do you know what you're taking? Can you trust what you're taking? Who is regulating that? How are they regulating it? Are they regulating it by the label on the box or the content? Is that content demonstrably safe? Is it effective? Those are big research questions, big questions that can't be answered for many years. But it's based on trust, and that's why you have to be so careful when you're exporting products, all right? Because when products get withdrawn from a market and it relates back to that country, then the whole of the herb, the whole traditional medicine market in that country comes under suspicion. And it takes a lot of work to recover the trust in that system, because it's not a regulated system. It's a trust-based system. So you're trusting that in fact a manufacturer, a producer, is going to put into that product what they say they're going to put into it. And you don't even know whether that's truly effective, whether it's truly safe on a long-term basis. You anticipate that it might be. But remember that when you're dealing with these issues and you're testing traditional medicines, you're not validating. You're not validating, you are assessing.
Assessing, yeah.
Very, very different. Don't bring in the bias of validation. Keep that separate.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Are we finished?
I think, yeah. Actually, we exceed 15 minutes from the schedule, but it's okay. I think that the discussion was very good, and since we don't have that more time, we can do this off the webinar. So everyone, we have come towards the end of our webinar. Before ending, on behalf of the Office of Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation UITM, I would like to once again thank Prof. Cordell for giving valuable insight on natural products, safety medicines, and way forward. And thank you to all of you for participating in this Stay Safe Online UITM Research Webinar Series 2.0. And for those who wish to get the jam latihan, please fill the link provided in the chat room. Until we meet again in the future, stay safe and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, I want to just say something before we all go.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to the people at UITM for hosting this and for making this possible. Thank you to everybody who participated, particularly those of you who asked questions, to all my friends who are online, some of whom I know who are online, some of whom I don't know who are online. Thank you, and take care. Stay safe. Stay safe. Bye, everybody. Thank you again.
Bye, Prof. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Cozy. Bye, Intan. Bye, Fatima.
We can
Bye,
do this
Prof.
again.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
It's very
Bye,
sad to
Intan.
say goodbye. I'm just going to stay until the last one.
We can make an MNT webinar then.
Yeah. I think there are a lot more questions to ask, but you know.
We're down to 95.
We have to arrange another session.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be, like face to face here, and then
This is
this
is fun. This, my goodness, this lasted almost 2 hours. Wow.
No, I think if we are face to face, we've got a lot more distraction. Now I think it's a good time to ask questions. We've got nothing else to do but ask questions and talk, so no distraction. And we don't want to have distraction, we want to think about research.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a record of 251.
251, yay.
Participating. Yeah, I was watching.
By the way, can I forgot to ask you, is this recorded?
Yes.
I believe so.
Okay. All right. Maybe can I get a copy, not of all the questions and everything, just of the presentation? That would be great. Just the audio of the presentation would be wonderful.
Yes, sure.
I'm not living yet. People are living, but I'm not living yet. I would like to say something about, your presentation.
Go ahead.
And I didn't have time to put on the brochure for the exam.
Yes. So sorry.
Yeah, you didn't. Oh.
Now we are left with 75 people. I don't think there are that many. So.
But don't you have a record of the 250 who were on? Just send each of one of them.
Yeah.
I have some of them as my contacts, but not all of them. It's okay.
But doesn't the chat room give you so that you know all the 250 people who are online?
Yeah.
Yes. We can have the list.
Yeah. So you can use that.
Yes, I'll do that.
This is actually live stream as well. So though we have 250 participants in the Google Meet, we also have live streaming in Facebook.
Yeah, right.
So actually we are expecting more than that.
Yeah, because Nordin was on there. So we're stuck at 74. We can't get below 74.
Jeff,
we wait until the organizer.
Jeff,
73.
Maribel says hi. Maribel from Philippines say hi, and she says thank you for the sharing. We'll share the recording of this webinar with the participants.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So shall we plan for another one, Jeff?
Shall we plan for another one?
Yeah.
We can think about another one. Yeah. We need, if there's going to be another one, we have to decide on a meaningful topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question, a burning question which I wanted to ask, but Hadiani shut everything down.
Okay. You can ask now because we are now on.
I don't want to feel pressured when I have to ask a question. I like the question to come slowly in a relaxed manner. So, I mean, I've been looking back at my past, and then we were interested in natural products, looking at compounds, isolating stuff and all these things, looking for some wonderful biological activity. And then here we are today talking about traditional medicine as well. And when I look at the 30 plants that has been prioritized, I mean, the 5 or more years of work on this traditional medicine, most of these herbs, when we look at the biological active constituent, they are just merely flavonoids and phenolics, right?
Yes.
So, with regards to having efficacy or even like that wonder drug kind of a capability, if you compare to drug development, I mean, so what with TCM? With traditional medicine? I mean, should we go to this, or should we do the old stuff in the drug discovery research? It's just that. Which one do we do? Yeah.
So I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Guido Pauli. Guido Pauli is at UIC. Pauli, Pauli, and he's got a couple of papers out. One that relates to what are called IMPs, IMPS, and the other that's
indigenous medicinal plants.
So you can look up both of those papers. I will dig them out, Cozy, and I will send them to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Really, what they relate to is the classic problem of dereplication that we have in natural products research, which is that we get the same compound time and time again, having biological in all these various systems. A compound like azelaic acid or quercetin or even gossypol have hundreds of biological effects and show up as active compounds in so many different assays, and they get in the way of meaningful drug discovery. And Guido has talked a lot about this. So I will send you this. I will send you papers, and I would ask that you share them with people, because they're very, very important papers. People really need to be aware of what's in those papers before they start doing activity, guided fractionation, because dereplication for those compounds becomes a very important first step.
And I think this is where natural products chemists, in this context, should be playing a more serious role. It's not just isolating things. It's about having the capacity to rapidly dereplicate an extract before they go into the much more expensive job of biological assays, etc. And then at least we're doing something of more importance, because most of I see that there is this disparity between various disciplines in this traditional medicine research, because most of the pharmacologists and biologists, they go and test first, right? And then they found, wow, this is a great biological activity, go into mechanism, but when you go back to the plant, there's nothing there really to actually holler about. It's just some small flavonoids. And then by the time we got there, resources has been actually wasted. In terms of the traditional medicine efficacy, you can't standardize very well because this was not done initially. It was done on a crude. So this is I think the disparity has been in this situation for the last 10, 15 years. And
it's longer. It's much longer.
Yeah, maybe longer, but this is being repeated with the new policies coming in, different ministries inputting a lot of money to do this, and we're still doing the same mistake.
Right, that's the problem. That's what we talked about.
I fear that if somebody takes down a piece of paper and start to evaluate the success of the NKA project, this is going to be the one that's going to come up again. There was some elements of chemistry.
That's right. See, I'm going to have to brag a little here.
Yeah.
When we had our NCDDG drug discovery program for anti-cancer agents, we had way too many cytotoxic extracts. We couldn't handle them all. What were we going to do? Well, we could prioritize in terms of the level of activity. We could prioritize in terms of accessibility to the plant material, or we could go back to what's our goal here. Our goal at that time was getting a novel natural product with a novel mechanism of action. Okay? So what we did was, and to be honest with you, we did this for the very first time. Anybody ever did this? And I've shown you this slide. It's of joining HPLC with a bioassay system, a 96-well bioassay system, with mass spec detection in the same time frame, coupled with a database of natural products. Okay? So that when you get your biological result from a particular well, that relates back to a particular mass spec. And that mass spec will have certain molecular ions, and you can look at those molecular ions in your database of molecules, ask the question, is that molecule with that mass likely to be biologically active in that system? We did that back in the 1990s. We did that 25 years ago. 25 years ago, yeah. And that's published. It's not a secret. I mean, so, and but if people, see, this is the thing. This is why you have to integrate systems. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to look at the extract, do the biology, look at the extract. No, you bring the two together. You bring the chemistry and the biology together. Look at them at the same time. Then do the AI part. That's the integration. The cyber eco-ethnopharmacolomics is not all in one place at one time. It might be a little bit of eco, it might be a little bit of cyber, and it might be a little bit of pharmacol together. It might be cyber and pharmacol and omics together. That's how you have to think. What do I need together to solve my problem?
Yeah. And you have to do it properly and correctly. There's
Well,
no
you've got to do it through dedication and high-level collaboration. Who's got the resources you need? How do you collaborate with them? How do you resell? You know, sorry, go. If there's another question, I'll answer another question. But anyway, go ahead.
Is that a question?
If there isn't another question, I'm going to tell you the story, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it to if there's any young people, because there's still 65 people around.
Anybody young, put up your hands.
Maybe they're waiting for lunch to be. They're waiting for lunch to be served.
Online lunch.
Anyway,
here, they're not. They are not young.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my Z44. Anyway, moving right along. So let me tell you this story. So prior to this goes back a few years now, as you'll see. Prior to 1989, Munro Wall and Mansukh Wani had a group at Research Triangle Institute. We had a group at UIC, and there were Bob Pettit's group, and there was other groups all around doing their anti-cancer thing. There were going to be 5 awards. 3 of them were going to be for plant research, and 2 of them were going to be for marine. Was how things looked like it was going to pan out. So I was going to be the leader of the UIC group, and I made a decision in consultation with the rest of the group, Farnsworth, Kinghorn, John Pizzuto, etc. I made the decision that we should be collaborating with Wall and Wani. Very strategic decision. Nobody, camptothecin and Taxol were big drugs. Nobody was going to turn down a grant which had Wall and Wani on it, right? That wasn't going to happen. Too big a political issue, right? So strategic. But scientifically, we could also justify it. They had assets that we didn't have. They had assets to synthesis because Wani is a dedicated synthetic natural product chemist. They had assays, and we had assets for them. We had the plant collection asset, and we had the extended biological testing aspect because of John Pizzuto's lab. And we also had some dereplication stuff going on. So together, rather than competing, together we were a very potent force. A very potent force, scientifically, not just politically, but scientifically, we could justify that. That's what I'm trying to get you to think about. How can you collaborate scientifically to make a really strong case?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight something. Probably I'm wrong, but I think we have to go back to screening activity.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you. I didn't quite catch that.
I think we need to go back to screening activity because at one time in Malaysia, screening is like a taboo.
Well, I have a question for you. This relates to libraries and the creation of libraries. I hope that all these years, you've been creating libraries of compounds and libraries of extracts.
I have to say that too.
That's how you're going to move forward.
It's a dream.
We are not moving
and we've talked about that, right? We have talked about it.
We don't have that. And full stop.
Huh?
Okay. So
for now.
So guess what? Maybe that's one of the aspects for your big collaborative program. That you can create a national library, a national resource somewhere, some institution, extracts that people generally can have access to and use as a resource for their biological experimentation.
Yes, that is a dream. It's a dream. Can you sing with me?
Yeah, make it a reality.
Yeah, make it a challenge.
The reality is we can all dream this dream together and then make it happen.
Kudos to John Lennon for saying that.
I think we have to start with trust, and then from there we can take it up and then make a library out of whatever that we have done.
We just have to get over COVID-19.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay.
All right. Anything else we need to deal with?
Yeah, I think maybe we should stop here before I get more depressed. Okay. All right. So we'll plan for a next one, Jeff. Maybe we'll talk about it and organize another one. This has been so much fun. And Maribel from Philippines says hi to you and say thank you to you.
Is she online?
Yeah,
is Maribel still on the line? Thank you for being here, Maribel.
She's off.
She's off. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure there are many more of our participants on the live streaming.
Is Nordin still on the line or not? Or
He's
was
on
he only on Facebook?
He's on Facebook.
He's on Facebook.
Okay.
So bye-bye, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye.
And thank you
everybody.
So much for joining us.
Thank you for everything. Thanks for all the arrangements. Yeah. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Hadiani. Thank you, Cozy. Thank you, Intel. Thank you, everybody.